Hi everyone, welcome to our first of many Lunch and Learn webinars. My name's Tanya Gray and I'm one of the directors of People Inc. Today presenting is Cameron Gray, my husband, and the other director of the business. He's a very experienced licensed immigration advisor. Just jumping to the next slide. For those of you that don't know People Inc., we're your one-stop shop for all things people. So if you employ people in your business, the chances are you're going to need our help. We have expert teams within the business. In Consulting HQ, we have a team of HR experts able to help with all people things. We have EMS Hub, which is our go-to HR software. VisaAid, who are presenting today, a team of licensed immigration experts doing both New Zealand and Australian immigration services, and Recruiting Z. So Recruiting Z are a team of recruitment experts. Many of you will know us. We have the onshore team specialising in permanent recruitment throughout New Zealand, and we also have an offshore team that many of you would have used us for, bringing skilled migrant workers in from the Philippines. So we are about to get started. This is a very short, sharp webinar. Hope you've got hot lunches. It's freezing up in Auckland today. We're only going to run this webinar for 30 minutes. We're not going to do any questions. So if you've got any questions, feel free to fire them back through to us. So I hope you enjoy this webinar. Cam's going to take the lead now. Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks, Tanya. We've got a lot to get through, so hold on to your hats. It feels like we've gone back in time. So we're back in 2019, where all of this was happening, all of the wins reports, labour market testing, lower skilled, higher skilled, all of that. We haven't had the ANSCO in the work visa system for almost 2 years, so since the accreditation system has been in place. So it's back, and it's back with a vengeance. If you've dealt with the ANSCO before, you'll understand that it's not fit for purpose, and it is outdated. Those who are just now learning about the ANSCO, really short. Skill level 4 to 5 roles are considered as low skilled roles, and the 1 to 3 skill level is a higher skilled roles. So most of these changes will affect the lower skilled roles, the 4 to 5. So what are the changes? The employer must take reasonable steps to ensure a supported AEWV is suitably, or applicant is suitably qualified. That's a easy one. Applicants now must meet the minimum skills standards. That's a big one. There's English requirements for AEWV applicants that are in the lower skilled roles, the 4 to 5. We have employers needing to consider New Zealand candidates for training now for 4 to 5 roles, but that's going to be needing to be clarified as well. We'll go into that. 4 to 5 roles are going to require longer advertising periods and engagement with WINS, which is just advertising with work and income from their website, unless they're exempt. We have accreditation now can be revoked if you're not providing your AEWV worker with at least 30 hours of paid work per week, which is not too new, but it's now been enforced in the suspension and of accreditation. We've got accredited employers have a duty now to inform immigration of a AEWV worker leaving the business unless their work visa has just 1 month left on it. So that's a new one. There's email addresses on the immigration website to contact them. The changes to the maximum continuous stay. So there's going to be shorter validity visas for the 4 to 5 roles unless they're exempt, which is going into the AEWV 2-year extensions, and I consider the rug being pulled from underneath some of these 4 to 5 roles because they were basically told they could extend their visa for 2 years, and then it's been taken off them. The last one, occupations that were going to be going on the green list are now not listed, which to me is the rug not even getting out of the delivery van for that one. So we don't have enough time really to go into too much depth. So I'll try to do as much as I can. If you've got questions, let us know, and I'll be happy to answer those via email. So the next slide is yeah, ensuring an applicant is suitably qualified. It's going to be a fairly easy one for those who are doing a good job at recruiting. I don't see this as a too much of a problem. What I would say is keep records. Um, if you're recruiting through us, that's not a problem. We will have all those records. But if you're doing it yourself, don't just rely on just the CV. Do some reference checking. Keep records. It could be important, especially to keep your accreditation. The big one here, though, is the minimum skills threshold, and this is where previously we could bring anybody into New Zealand. They didn't have to have the 3 years relevant work experience, say. They could have no relevant work experience and we could get them in. Now the threshold has been raised, and it's been raised up to a minimum of at least 3 years, or they have a bachelor's degree, or they've got a relevant qualification that's assessed as a level 4 or higher. There are some exemptions to this. Obviously, anybody on the green list and who can meet the green list requirements are exempt, and anybody paid 2 times the national median wage would be exempt, plus those who have got occupation registration. So most people are going to require that to meet the minimum skills threshold. Now, that is in the 2-year extensions as well. So that's causing a lot of grief there for those who have come out on an AEWV who didn't provide their work experience in their initial application, wouldn't have to. Now they're being asked for at least 3 years relevant work experience, which some don't have. So we're looking at those ones and saying, well, you might need to wait until the last minute of your current visa. So you get 3 years relevant work experience in New Zealand in your current position and then submit it. But there's, obviously risks to leaving it to the last minute. These changes especially are going to affect 4 to 5 roles. So, the ANSCO mentions that maybe a high school qualification or at least 1 year's or not even any experience would be suitable for this particular role. But Immigration New Zealand are going to ask for 3 years minimum. And so they're asking for more than what the ANSCO is stating, which is a little bit too far. And as I see it, Australia, to give you an example, have recently said that they're going to reduce their threshold to just 1 year's relevant work experience. So they've gone from 2 years down to 1. We've gone up from 0 to 3. So yeah, it's a bit of a difference in the countries. Give you a little example of how this would affect a level 4 occupation. If they've come in, if they can't meet the minimum requirements because they don't have the work experience, they're not likely to have a bachelor's degree. They might have a level 4 qualification or higher, but that's going to need NZQA assessment, which is going to take, say, 12 weeks for processing and maybe $500 extra. And so that is quite, 12 weeks. We're waiting enough to get a visa through these days. We don't want to wait another 12 weeks. So without that experience, it makes life really, really difficult for the 4 to 5 roles. Also, while we're talking about this, sufficient evidence of work experience. So when immigration say they must show at least 3 years relevant work experience, they are also mentioning that it must be sufficient evidence. So the days of just providing a work reference, it's not going to be enough in most cases. You're going to have to provide some information that's going to support that work reference. So pay slips or tax information, something that can be verifiable, which immigration aren't doing too many checks these days, but they want to see something that there's an addition to the work reference. So just make sure that there's lots of information to support their work experience. English, coming into the 4 to 5 roles, those applicants are going to need to do an English test. It's quite a low threshold, but it's causing problems. And we've got an example of someone who's worked here on an old essential skills work visa for 5 years in New Zealand, and they are now to renew their visa with an AEWV, and they can't meet their English requirements. They've failed twice. So that's putting that application into jeopardy. Go to the next slide. So suitable New Zealanders, yeah, we're going to have to advertise for longer for these 4 to 5 roles. It's not such a big deal, but dealing with work and income can be a bit of a process. So just be mindful that it might take a little bit longer, and they will refer candidates, and you need to be very, very careful of the way you assess any candidates that come through. On top of this, immigration have kind of have added in some things to the instructions which say that the employer must consider any candidates that could be trained. Now that's quite a difficult one to deal with. The latest I've seen from immigration is that they consider somebody that would be a reasonable amount of time to be trained would be about 6 months. So if we're doing a job check and we're saying we want 1 year's experience, and if somebody applies with 6 months of experience, typically we would be able to rule them out as not suitable. Well, now we do need to consider them as to whether they can be trained for the position. In ANSCO 4 to 5 positions, they also want a declaration with the job check to confirm that you have done those checks. And what we are seeking clarification on is just whether the declaration is not needed for 1 to 3 roles, so the higher skill level roles, but we're just seeking clarification as to whether we do need to consider those candidates for training for those higher skilled roles. At the moment, we're doing that. We would normally do that anyway, but it's not clear enough as to whether it's mandatory. So we'll have some more information about that. We'll go to the next slide. And yeah, grounds for revoking accreditation. They've just added in that 30 hours a week, which is nothing new. You must pay your AEWVs, or you must have guaranteed them in their employment agreement when they applied for their visa 30 hours a week. So you must pay them 30 hours a week. As the economy is a bit sluggish, questions have been asked whether they can reduce AEWV workers' hours. No, you can't. You must pay them 30 hours. And just remember, it's not 60 hours a fortnight, it's 30 hours a week. That's the wording. Notifying immigration of employees leaving. So it's just the AEWV holders. It's just good practice anyway to notify immigration. But now they've put that into the instructions that you must do that. So there's an email address up on the immigration website for employers to do that. I'm hoping it will turn up in the Adept system so that we can easily do that. And if you can't find the address, just let me know. Also, just with the suspensions of accreditation, if an employer is being investigated, INZ now have the power to suspend accreditation over that during the time of the investigation. And next slide. So the maximum continuous stay is a bit contentious. For highly skilled roles, 1 to 3 ANSCO roles, it's 5 years at the moment, and you're faced with a 12-month stand down, which means that the applicant needs to be offshore, so outside of New Zealand, for 12 months, continuous months. So if they ended up here as a visitor, that won't count in their 12-month period, so they'll have to leave for an extra month or so. And this is the concerning part to employers. There are ways of avoiding the stand down, but most of them are going to be avoided by the applicant becoming a New Zealand resident. And as we all know, residency is very, very tough at the moment. So not many are getting through. There is a slight trick that we're trying to use, and that is if your AEWV worker has a partner here, let's see if we can get the partner their own AEWV, and then your employee gets their partnership work visa. So swapping them around. That's worked in the past. So that's something that you might want to consider looking into as to whether the partner is able to get an AEWV. So that potentially that could get them another 2 to 5 years in New Zealand. For 4 to 5 roles, that stand down period is going to come into play after 3 years for most of them. They're not going to be able to, well, a lot of them are not going to be able to get their 2-year extension. So if you're going to recruit any new AEWV workers for the lower skilled roles, the visa is also going to be granted for just 2 years, but you are able to extend that visa for 1 more year if you do another job check. So basically, they want you to do more labour market testing after 2 years to get that extra year. But after that extra year, they're going to be faced with the stand down period. Go to the next slide. The 2-year extensions, as I said, the rules, the rug's being pulled from underneath some of these workers. The 4 to 5 roles might not be able to get their extension, and they, there's some dates there that immigration have provided to say, hey, look, between the 21st of June 2023 and the 6th of April, if they submitted their AEWV during that time and they were in a 4 to 5 role, they'll still be eligible for their 2-year extension. The immigration's explanation of that is that, at the time that they submitted, they were under the impression they were going to get a 5-year visa, and so they've given a little bit of leeway there. I think that's completely wrong, because at the time the borders opened, everybody was eligible for a 3-year visa at the time, and we could renew as many times as we'd like. So why aren't we giving it to those people? I don't understand that one. Anyway, so another way of them 4 to 5 roles being able to get their 2-year extension is if they're on the green list and they meet the requirements, which is tough. They're in the transport sector, so a work to residence transport sector, which not many are, or they're paid 1.5 times the national median wage, which is far-fetched for most, but that's a possibility. Or they've applied before the 6th of April and they're part of the care workforce or the transport sector agreements. So there's little exceptions there where they can apply. What you've got to understand is that the ANSCO code that we were using, or everybody was using when we were doing these job checks over the last 2 years, was not really relevant. Sure, we'd get a sort of match to it, but there was no implications of getting that ANSCO code wrong. Now, those job checks are causing us grief because the ANSCO code might not be a 1 to 3 ANSCO, and it puts these guys' extensions at risk. And that is really unfortunate. And yeah, if I had a crystal ball or a time machine, I'd go back to those ANSCOs and relook at them. But yeah, it is what it is. The solution to that, though, if we have used a lower ANSCO code, is to not reuse the old job check token. So just do a new job check, but what that's going to require is offering the AEWV worker a higher skilled role. So genuinely offer them a higher skilled role, do the job check for it. If the job check finds no suitable is approved and there was no suitable Kiwis for the role, then the worker applies for their new AEWV and probably would get at least another 2 years on there to take them to the maximum of 5 years stay in New Zealand. We'll go to the next slide. As I said, well, we're taking a look now at residency options because, the stand down period, to avoid that, we really want those workers to be able to get to residency. And as I mentioned, it's out of reach for most, especially trades, very, very difficult for them. The reason for that is that most of them are looking at the skilled migrant category. And as you can see there, a bachelor or higher degree that rules out most trades. They won't have it. If they don't have that, they're looking to earn 1.5 times the national minimum wage, almost 100K a year. If they can't reach that, then it must be a registered occupation. And so you can see that most welders, scaffolders, it's going to be really difficult for the trades to get to residency at the moment. On top of that, if you decide that, yes, I can pay the 1.5 times the national median wage, well, that's great. They need at least 3 years relevant work experience on that higher rate. Now, that puts us into a bit of a conundrum where we don't have enough time on their current visa to get the 3 years relevant work experience or skilled work experience at the higher rate. Now, INZ did say late last year that they would provide an exception for people who are on a pathway to residency, but we don't know what that looks like yet, and it hasn't been announced yet. So you've got to consider this in your recruitment strategy, because if your workers can't get to residency, they can't extend their visas, they can't have a partner take over as the principal applicant, then we've got an issue. They're going home, most likely. And so your recruitment strategy needs to consider that. Going on to the next slide, looking at other resident pathways for them. These are green list occupations, and say there are some healthcare in there as well, some of the sector agreements. So straight to residence and work to residence are definitely a great option. English might be a bit of trouble for some of them and their dependent family, so it is something to bring up now. They need to figure out if they can meet the English requirements or if they're going to need some lessons, but they need to start that now. English test results are valid for 2 years, so they could complete a test now, and if they pass, it's likely they'll be able to use it in their application. The biggest concern here is the ANSCO assessment. The ANSCO assessment that was done in the job check for their AEWV doesn't necessarily mean they're in that occupation as per the green list. There will be another ANSCO assessment when they submit a straight to residence or a work to residence. Work to residence is really where I'm concerned. So I feel that when submitting a work to residence application, the ANSCO assessment is going to be critical to that. Some are going to find that INZ consider them not in the occupation that the green list has listed, because the ANSCO code is not a substantial match to their current job, and that is going to be a massive problem in a couple of years' time, and it's going to cause a lot of headaches. So for workers that are looking at work to residence that aren't in really sector agreement work to residence, I would be assessing the ANSCO right now, because it could impact the 2-year start date for their work experience to count, and it could all blow up in your face in a couple of years. The next slide, onto the renewals. The renewals looked pretty heavy going when we first saw them come out, but they're not. It seems to be quite a straightforward process, but the potential for trouble is on the cards. If you haven't done what you've said you're going to do in your first period of accreditation, and immigration start asking questions, there will be will be problems. So for those who have done their employer modules, who have done their settlement support, yeah, shouldn't be a problem. And we're finding that applications are getting processed quite quickly. You need to understand the immigration changes, the changes to AEWV to make a decision on whether you do need to renew your accreditation or not. So if we go to the next slide, real basic parts to the accreditation. You've got to be financially stable and genuinely operating. So immigration could potentially ask for information about that. You're going to make some declarations there. They might ask you for a P&L to confirm whether those declarations are correct. The compliance is really important. And immigration have some allowances there. So if for some reason you haven't been compliant for some part of that accreditation process, they want to know what you've done to fix that issue and how quickly that happened. So be upfront, get it, be on the front foot, provide evidence that you've fixed the issues. And just remember that settlement support must have been provided within the first month of the worker commencing employment. So those who haven't provided settlement support within that time frame, it doesn't seem to be any allowances there. But I would say immigration will take a reasonable approach to it. If you have provided it to them, then I'm sure if I was outside of that 1 month, I'm sure they'll be okay with it. If you've just provided it to them 2 years later, maybe they'll have concerns. On to the next slide. So yeah, financial position, recruitment practices. They will be looking at the new settings. So have you considered these AEWVs? Have you looked into them and made sure that they're suitably qualified for the role? And you've done some checking. You've done some reference checking. They might want to see a bit of that evidence. They want to know that your employment agreements are up to date. Everybody's gone through that process already. If you've had you've done job checks, and they're pretty strict on employment agreements, so make sure that they are up to date. And yeah, make sure you're complying. That's for sure. On the next slide. Really, the key changes to the accreditation is that the grounds for suspension. It's just something to be aware of, that you could be faced with a suspension during a active investigation, which is something just to keep in the back of your mind. Employ workers for at least 30 hours a week. That's stock standard, really, and luckily, or thank goodness, franchise accreditation is gone. It made no sense, so that's disappearing. If you've got franchise accreditation, you're on to standard or high volume now, so you can apply for that. On the next slide, again, as we've mentioned, you must ensure that any AEWV candidate that you're recruiting is suitably qualified, skilled, and most of our clients and most of you on this webinar will do good jobs there, so we're not too concerned about it. And the suspension grounds have just been a bit, given the issues they've had and been in the media, they've really wanted to clamp down on employers. So I think it's a good thing. The next slide, 30 hours a week again, franchise gone, renewing accreditation. It's only required for when you want to continue to recruit AEWV workers, or you want to support residency. So that's including work to residence. You don't need to renew accreditation to retain your current AEWV workers. I, again, don't agree with that. I think if we're tying employers into certain standards, we should keep them into those certain standards, but that's up to immigration. And yeah, so You don't need to keep it if you're just wanting to retain your existing staff. You can let it lapse. Remember that if you let it lapse for more than 12 months, immigration will treat any accreditation application after that point as a brand new application. And yeah, keeping accreditation enables your workers to do their extensions, to apply for other visas, and residency. That's the main part. On the next slide, yeah, you can see there on the pros and cons really of renewing your accreditation. And yeah, if you want to discuss whether it's right for your business, then let me know. As I say, I'm a fan of keeping employers within the accreditation system. I like my employers keep being on their toes with migrant workers. It's very important, and being tied into that is a part of it. So that's just my thoughts on it. But yeah. It's not required to keep the staff, so it's serious consideration, especially if you're at a high volume paying that kind of application fee. So that's really it for the changes in the accreditation. As I say, it's a really brief overview of it. I'm going to pass you back to Tanya. She'll finish up. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, Cam. Well, as you can all hear, immigration's a minefield. It's changing all the time. There's lots of ins and outs and things to be aware of. My advice is if you need help, engage in an expert licensed immigration advisor. There's a lot of things that the team in the Visa Aid team know within People Inc. that other people aren't aware of. So look, we can help. We can help with creating documentation, reviewing documentation, making sure everything's compliant. The immigration advisors manage all compliance for you. They manage your entire application through to conclusion, and they're here to help. Plus, we have a direct line to the case officers in INZ. So it's 12:32. We're 2 minutes late. So thanks everyone for taking the time to join us today. Hopefully you have learned some tips and tricks. If you've got any questions, drop us a line and we will be happy to help. So thanks everyone for your time. Really appreciate it. Have a great afternoon.